determined that in their event it would be wiser to stay where they are or to head out?
Well, if everybody took my advice, we'd have some serious gridlock in our major cities. But if anything nuclear happens anywhere in the world, I don't mean right here, but I mean if in Iran or with Russia, if anything nuclear happens anywhere in the world, everybody listening to us tonight, if they live in a major metropolitan area, they need to skedaddle promptly. That you do not want to wait for the government to tell you to evacuate, because it's not going to happen. They're not going to allow that panic and gridlock to happen and shutting everything down. So if you're in a major metropolitan area or close to a military target, it's the first instance of anything nuclear going on anywhere in the world. I hope you've been sending Christmas cards to that uncle out in the country, because that's where you're going. And you need to scoot right then. And if you haven't, if things transpire too quickly, and if there's any doubt in your mind that you can't make that trip because the roads are already clogging up and you're going to get stuck in a Houston-type exodus from Hurricane Rita, where everybody was stuck on the highway, if it's starting to look like you can't make the whole trip in time, don't try it. Stay where you are, make the best of it where you are, just hope you're not right at the epicenter, and you need to shelter in place right there. You do not want to get stuck halfway through on an exodus that stalls out, because then whatever supplies you got are only going to be what you can carry on foot, and you've got no shelter, and you're amongst a whole bunch of scared, panicked people, and there's not going to be police to protect you. And you don't want to do that. So you evacuate if you've got a place to go, the means to get there, and the time as best as you can figure to beat the rush. But don't wait for the government to tell you what to do, because they're either going to be late in telling you, or they won't tell you with sufficient urgency to get you to do it, or they won't tell you at all.
Shane, it's Joe again.
Thank
On
you.
that note, some people will have the ability to select properties. A lot of people right now are moving across the states for various reasons. Some people are leaving places like Anaheim, California. Some people are moving from Florida, and they're going to smaller states, or not smaller states, but areas where there's a lot less population with the hopes of finding land. And they're going there with the plans of building things like fallout shelters. Some people, however, feel that they're stuck where they're at due to work, things like that. What would you say, people without basements, people that maybe live right in New York City or in a place like Los Angeles, what can you tell them about being able to shelter in a place where maybe they live in a studio apartment or a small place that has no basement, they have no access to anything other than maybe just a closet? What are some of the things that they would want to have on hand, or things at their house that they could use to shelter in place?
Yeah. We've had some people call us up, over the last decade, and they tell me about where they are in a big city, and they're convinced that that's probably going to be a target, but, their kids go to school, they got this great job and stuff, and I say to them, the school and the job won't be there if this really happens. I mean, these things that you're saying that appeal to you there, I said, if you really feel that the threat is of sufficient probability that we're having this conversation, move. I can't sugarcoat it. Now, you might be lucky enough to be like in a high-rise building that didn't sustain blast damage. The windows are intact. Let's say it happened in the adjoining Twin City or whatever, and all you've got is fallout to worry about. Listen, if you're in a 6 or 8 story or higher building, and you can get into the middle of the center of the building, and the windows are intact, that's a wonderful place to sit out the radioactive fallout. And the reason is the fallout is way on the ground level, and it's on the roof. And that distance from you and those multiple floors, all of that shielding, that's a very safe place to be in the center of any structure that's intact. Now, it's not going to work if the windows are blown in, because now the fallout's blowing in on your floor right there. And this is another piece of good news, too. The radioactive fallout is only lethally dangerous for the first 2 to 3 days, okay? unless you're right on the cusp of, a big crater or something, okay? But the majority of people will be downwind, some miles downwind or 100 miles downwind, and here comes the radioactive fallout, and we'll talk about the shelter they can do in their house, but the first thing they need to know is this radioactive fallout is dangerous because it's giving off so much energy, but because of that, it's getting weaker very quickly. In the first 7 hours, compared to the first hour when the bomb went off, in the first 7 hours, the radioactivity, the lethality of this radioactive fallout has lost 90% of its intensity in the first 7 hours. And in another sevenfold increase in time, 7 times 7, 48 hours, 2 days, it will have lost 99% of its lethal intensity. So what we're talking about here is if it would have been fatal, at 500 Roentgen per hour, which would be fatal in an hour, what we're talking about is, it's only 1/100th of that in 2 days. So the shelters that we'll talk about next and what you can do at home, as cramped and uncomfortable and as expedient and thrown together as they are, you can put up with anything for 2 or 3 days while the worst of the radioactivity dissipates. But if you aren't protected for those first 2 days, and we have intensity of 500 Roentgen or higher, your history. You're going through cancer treatments without any painkillers, as you die over the next 2 weeks. And this is avoidable. If you couldn't get out from under it before it arrived, and that may be the case because if you have multiple nukes go off, you've got fallout from one showing up, and then the wind blows one from another. You know what I mean? We could have some fallout to deal with from. It may not just be one event, where you missed it. So if you have to shelter, we're really only talking about hunkering down for 2-3 days, and I don't care how cramped and uncomfortable that is. It's preferable to the alternative.